Hey, and welcome back to another Twinmotion video. And in this video, we're going to look at Skydomes. Like, this is so exciting. Skydomes. Like, we get to change this. It's really cool. Okay, before we get into it, now there's a lot to do. Please demolish that like button. I mean, come on, guys. You know, you're here to learn something, I hope. Maybe you just end up liking the video, but regardless, please demolish that like button. It really helps me out a lot. Okay, so we're looking at Skydomes, and if you're not familiar with what a Skydome is, specifically an HDRI, high dynamic range Skydome, HDR, we're able to not only download those that we're looking for within Twinmotion, it's already in Twinmotion, but we can apply that to our sky and have all of these really nice looking skies and have the sun be oriented to that sky, and it just, I tell you what, the quality, I mean, if you saw the quality increase from the path tracing that's now within Twinmotion 2022, you're going to be amazed when you add that along with the HDRI Skydomes. Wow. Okay, so getting into it now, how do we change this, and what kind of settings can we change? What can we deal with? What can we do? Well, before we even change it, I just want to show you where these are. And you may not need to know really where they are, but they're literally in the main screen here, in the main library. There's literally a tab called Skydome, which is awesome. And not only do we have just skies, they didn't just give us skies, they gave us different categories of skies, which is awesome. And we have morning, afternoon, noon, and then low sun. So there's a ton. I found that, you know, if you want true sun, you probably want to avoid some of the darker, cloudier skies. But then again, those are kind of cool if you're not really wanting those hard shadows. But really, once we go into the morning and afternoon, we have more options here. So we have basically the time of day, and then we've got the clear, cloudy, and overcast. And then that's the same for each of those, whether at different times, morning, afternoon, noon, and then low sun. So, I mean, low sun is really fun. And so whenever we click into here, we can see, look at all these skies. And so we have like, it's literally a 360 image that is going to be our sky. And not only that, it's HDRI, which means it's going to interact with our sun appropriately, and as it would, as if that were the actual sky and we had our sun turned on where the sun is in that image. And so these previews here are actually quite helpful. Let me show you what we're seeing here. So the previews here are, of course, the flattened 360 image, okay? And then we have in the center, we have a sphere that is plain white, and it's just white, and you can see how it reacts in this particular sun, in this particular sky. You can see it changes. And then particularly what I think matters a lot more is the sphere to the left and the right of the center white sphere. And if we look at the left sphere, what we're seeing here is basically like a glass image. You're allowing light to diffuse through this particular sphere. And the light in this case is not only light, of course, but it is the projection of the actual Skydome. And so that's great. It's basically like, what does glass look like? You know, how does glass perform, and what is it looking like in this type of a sky? And to the right of the sphere, the right sphere, is a full 100% fully reflective, 100% reflective mirror. And so this, again, of course, is reflecting the Skydome that we see in the actual image, but it gives you an idea of what a mirror might appear like in this sort of environment. And of course, in this one, we've got low sun, and it's clear and it's really bright. Well, just about the whole image is blown up because we're looking like directly at the sun. And I'm not a big fan of this one, but really all of these here, you could see that, man, you know, this is a high quality sky. I don't know how this would turn out, like really in a rendering, but you could see that the mirror and the glass, for that matter, reflect it perfectly. And I don't mean that to be a pun, but it is. It just happens to be. So there's our preview, and that's what we can get from the preview, is so you have an idea of what the glass in a mirror might look like, as well as like 100% rough material where that has no reflections, which is that white sphere in the middle. Okay, so we've looked at all these, and now, of course, what we want to do is we want to apply it to the sky. We can't just drag it in, because not only can we not just drag it in, but we also need to download it. And, you know, not a big deal. If you want to save yourself time down the road, as soon as you install 2022 or any new updates that include other skies or whatnot, just come in here and download them all, leave for 10 minutes, come back, they'll be downloaded. But besides that, we'll have to download them. So I'm just going to download this one here, which is, you know, make sure you're signed in and all that, but it will prompt you to do that. And once we get this downloaded, we'll be able to use it. And so where do we use that while it's downloading? Well, not in the imports. not necessarily in context either, but in the settings. Now we looked at rendering last time, the path tracing, so look at that first, but also now lighting. If we click on lighting, we now have not only all the same settings that we're used to seeing, but now we have the Skydome option, which is awesome. And so the second I turn Skydome on, I actually have a different one applied already, but once I turn this on, you'll see what we're ultimately getting. It's a drastically different image. You can see we're a bit blown out here, and we've got some nice reflections, and the clouds are okay. But if you want something very specific, you're going to want to use Skydomes. And so let's turn this on. And of course, this is not this low sun clear 9 that we just downloaded, but let's go ahead and turn this on. Immediately, like, wow, that's so much better. And we can see how the light from this Skydome, or rather our sun, is reflecting where the sun is in the Skydome. And so we can see that all the shadows are responding to that, and everything that we're used to seeing is responding to that, which is amazing. So let's go ahead and take this new one that we just downloaded, and all we're going to do is, of course, go into more in Skydome. We need to look at what's more, and that's where we'll actually replace it. So we'll click on more here, and we can see, well, that's it. That's the Skydome I'm using, and you can see where it's located, which I'm curious to see if that's actually available. Because most things in Twinmotion are pretty locked down, and I can't find the files themselves. But yeah, that does give us a file path, which is cool, leading me to believe that we could potentially add more, but we'll save that for another video. So what I'm going to do is take this low sun clear 9 that we just downloaded, and I'm going to drag this onto our currently applied Skydome. And once we do that, it's going to update, but they will have an impact on what you're ultimately going to get. So this is about to update, and once it does, we can look through all these settings. All right, and we are updated. I mean, look at that. I mean, the background doesn't quite match the scene here, but if we're ignoring the background, we can see this is a fantastic sunset shot. I mean, my gosh, like, this is really great. Okay, so with all that said, let's start to look at the different settings we have with this Skydome. And not only this Skydome, this applies to any Skydome. So we have the intensity, which may or may not be at 4. My guess is it's at 1 or 0, but you can see here, this, and think of the intensity kind of as exposure. It's not directly, but because you can see it does kind of balance things out. I do have auto exposure on, so that might play into it as well, but you can see how it's more bright, it is more intense, and we have less contrast. So just things to be aware about. If I put this at 0, obviously the Skydome itself is not on, and by that I mean, like, there's no light. We're not allowing it to be intense at all, as in like 0. You'll notice there's no negative number, so 0 is basically off. I'm not sure why you'd want it at 0, so basically at least 1, I would say, just to give you a baseline. But if we go into more here, we can see we have ambient, and this is the ambient that we're used to seeing. So whenever I put this up to, let's just say 2, obviously the ambient light is greatly increased, which I really like, because sometimes you might want to increase this based on the particular Skydome that you're using. You might want to decrease it. It really depends on the Skydome. And for that, actually 2 is the max ambient you can have. And you can see the difference here as I start to drag this up and down, whether you want more or not. 0.75 is the default, so I'll leave it there. But actually, I'm going to change this. I'll change this to 1.5. And I'm going to change this because I'm going to show you where you could also find this ambient value. And that happens to be within just the regular Skydome settings, of course, like we just saw, but actually in lighting. So the lighting, this is the same ambient that we're used to seeing. These are the 5 original lighting settings that were in Twinmotion before Skydomes were available. But ambient was here, and it did the same things. We had the same minimum and maximum values. But now this also impacts the Skydome if you have it on. And likewise, I'm going to change this to, let's say, 0.9. You can see it change, but I'm going to go back into the Skydome in the intensity of the Skydome and see, yeah, it's 0.9. So basically, these are the exact same. I'm not sure why it's duplicated. I think because Twinmotion wanted to make it seem like that this ambient was tied to the Skydome, when in fact it's not only tied to the Skydome. Yes, it is, but it's tied to just the overall lighting setting. So I don't know. To me, it doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I see that it is tied to it in a way. So it just kind of know that they're linked together. So coming back to the Skydome here, we can see that match sun is on, and this is on by default, and I'd recommend that you leave it on, depending on what you're going for. Can't say that I would want to, at least initially, have match sun turned off. And so let's go ahead and see what this does. If I turn match sun off, well, you can see that we had the same sun as if I were to have turned the Skydome off. We have the same sun, like location and shadows and everything. So if I turn this on, the sun result doesn't change while we get to keep the Skydome. Now, again, I don't know why you'd want a nice looking Skydome and not have the sun match location. That is up to you as to why you'd want to do that or not. One of the benefits I see to Skydomes is the fact that you can have the sun match it perfectly. Right there, tells you exactly what you need. And so the other options we have rotation. This is pretty self-explanatory. We know what it is, but this is great for refining the sun. And of course, in this one, because it's a low sun, it really is going to have a giant impact on our shot. So as I rotate this, you could clearly see, I mean, it looks beautiful even as I turn it around. But if I want to change the angle, this is exactly how I do it. Now, I will say this is not paying any sort of attention to where true north or whatever north might be and what it actually is. This just says, forget that. I want to look at a pretty image, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to frame a shot here. That's typically what I would do for a rendering. Now, if I'm really worried about showing a client really where the sun is at a certain time of day or what they might expect to see throughout a day, I would not necessarily want to jack with the rotation. I'd confirm that the time of day matches the sun location based on your longitude and latitude. But you can see clearly what it's doing, and it looks great. It really does look great. And obviously, this can be done anywhere, but we get the full rotation of that 360 Skydome. Okay, wonderful. I mean, it looks really good, and we can put that wherever we want. It does not matter. Skydome effects lightings. Now, this you can think of this similarly to match sun, not exactly, because it's obviously different. This has nothing to do with the sun itself, but I will say that the Skydome affecting the lighting will basically match the tones, match the mood, match kind of everything, the balance of light that you would expect to see with this Skydome. Having all of this on kind of leads me to believe, and more from a logical standpoint, that having these on will result in an image that really fits the Skydome. This is basically saying I want my Skydome to take over everything. And by take over everything, I mean the sun and the lighting. And so, like, everything lighting and sun related is sky, of course. All of that together meshes together well. So, which is why I would say, leave all of this on. And so, actually, I'm going to go here and turn a bunch of my lighting on. I've got a ton of these lights, and I want to make sure that they're on, because once they're on, we'll be able to actually compare the difference between what this does and what this doesn't do as far as the Skydome affecting that lighting. Okay, so what I've done is turned on all these lights, and there's a ton of them. And so just to show you where they are, there's a ton of them all running on inside. So I'm going to go ahead and show you where those are before I change the setting. We get an idea of what this setting is doing as we affect the setting. Okay, so once we move aside, we can see that, these lights are on. They're doing something. They're on there. Great. The main thing now is just to see what this does. And so we go back to our lighting here and then into our Skydome. And I'm going to turn this Skydome effects lighting on and off, and we can get an idea what it does. So here it is on. And so, again, I think this looks really balanced. It may look a bit different when I turn this off because it will just look different. So turning this off, we immediately see that everything's a bit brighter here at the bottom. And that's just because of, there's a lot more light. I mean, really, these lights are producing quite a lot of light. And so again, I'm going to turn this off and then back on. And you can see that, we're getting some, I guess you would call it unnatural light or unnatural ambient light back here in just kind of back of house spaces where we wouldn't expect to see that based on these lights. So I only have these lights on. And so really, whenever I turn this Skydome effects lighting on and off, that's the difference we're seeing here, is really kind of this back house space. But really, what is this doing? Well, again, this is responding to the actual Skydome that we have and the light that's coming in. And so what this is doing is attempting to balance the light in such a way to where it matches the tone, the mood, just the overall light levels of the space. And it seems to fit better when I have the Skydome effects lighting on, because I mean, like you would expect, you wouldn't have giant spotlights on in the middle of a hallway with glass if it's in the middle of the day. And in this case, it's not the middle of the day, but well, we also do have light and sun directly shining into the space. And so to not have this space look completely blown out from all the lights that we have, we're having the lights respond to the Skydome, so everything matches the Skydome. Like we said, with the matched sun, we're getting the same kind of effect, but with the sun versus the lighting that we have in the scene. So you can clearly see it seems to not only be a bit more realistic, but it fits the tone of the lighting in the scene based on the Skydome when I have Skydome effects lighting on. So, nothing too crazy there. Those are just two options that I probably want to roll with being on, and again, they are on by default. That's just something to be aware, because I really do think that matters a lot. So that's just kind of me. You could really even outside see the big difference. Just the fact that we have those lights in the scene with the auto exposure, it's kind of blowing out some of this area here. And while it might look better to some degree, definitely the building itself looks way too blown out for the lights being inside the building. But when I turn this off, we can see, yeah, we do get some light still in here, but the foreground looks a lot more natural. And I like to think that whenever I render this out, this would look more balanced and not nearly as blown out and white. But that's something we'll have to check on ourselves later on. And so finally, we have Smog on or off. And I'm not sure what Twinmotion's fascination is with Smog, because I don't know. By default, it's on everywhere, and that's fine. I don't have an issue with it. It's just the type of thing that I would like. Ideally, I would think, I'm going to make a rendering, I'm going to do this or that, and I forget about Smog. Well, I typically forget about Smog. So it's the type of thing I would want to have off by default, just kind of knowing in my mind, it's a clear scene. And my problem with Smog is that oftentimes I go about that process just how I described. I forget Smog, I don't know it exists, and I don't turn it off, and I think it's clear. Well, in fact, it's not clear. Now, I'm not saying that it really matters, because the only place where you could see Smog in the Skydome as I turn this on and off is just very barely back here, and I really doubt you could see it on the video. I really do. I can barely see it here. Now, that's to say, I haven't changed any other Smog settings, like in the weather or anything like that. So let's go to our weather, into our effects here. And I'm going to put my Smog at, let's just put it at 100. So we can clearly see there's plenty of Smog here. So that Smog is 100. And let's see if the same Smog percent shows up in my Skydome. Well, I don't have a percentage, of course, but I have on or off. And so this is the Smog percentage, of course, made maxed out, and it's clearly on. But if I turn this off, I'm not seeing any difference. So this is very interesting. So basically, the Smog that you see within the Skydome is, in fact, different than the Smog that you see within the weather. Hopefully that is something that is reconciled, because that's a bit confusing to me. I understand it's a different setting and all this, it's weather and not the Skydome, all this, but that's just something you need to be aware of, because it is clearly called Smog. But the main thing, I guess the main difference is that you set the percentage of Smog within the weather, basically how much is there. And in the Skydome, you say, well, is it there or not? Now, the problem I have with that, the only problem is that if I turn it off in the Skydome, I would expect it to go off everywhere. Now, however, Twinmotion has the hierarchy of that value being on or off set, I don't know. But just be aware of that. The default's 15%. I don't necessarily like that, but, it's hard to tell between 15 and 0. Not a huge deal. Okay, well, so we've looked at the Skydomes when it comes to the lighting settings. Well, we have the exact same thing when it comes to media mode, and I'm not saying it's any different, but let's come to this shot here, which is similar to what we're looking at. And maybe I want to aim a bit more up at the sky, because when we're focusing on the sky a bit more. I will come back and reload this here, and let's go back into more. And just like before, we have our path tracing. I'm not going to click that. We don't need to wait on that. But the lighting has our Skydome, and of course it is off by default. And just so you know, of course, if you're in media mode, every other setting that we made, once we quit media mode, we could see we go back to what we had before, and which is telling me that media mode is, of course, different. Media mode applies to the image that I'm selecting, which is this one, and so I need to go through and do that for this image. And so it's now turned on, and of course now this is also not the one I had selected previously. Maybe we want to use that one, maybe we don't. That's not a huge deal whether we want to use that one or a different one. Not a big deal at all. It looks like the intensity might be defaulted at 4, just something to check on. 1 might be too low depending on some, it may not be for others. And so we want to match this, and at this point we're just kind of going for a nice looking shot. It doesn't necessarily matter where the sun is, but do I want smog? Not really. Do I care about the intensity? Probably want it to be a bit less, maybe 2, 3. This isn't a big deal. Now, I will say, this is kind of the thing that threw me off initially, but it does make sense. Now, if I come up here where we're used to changing the sun settings, well, actually, because we're in media mode, we can do it here as well. I'm going to come into location here. And you'll notice because I have the Skydome on specifically, I only can change the time of day. I cannot change like the time of year. I cannot change the north offset. Basically, all of this is like overridden by the fact that I have the Skydome on. Not a big deal, just something to be aware of. Now, this is the most confusing part, I think. I'm going to change the time of day. Does nothing. Well, by does nothing, I say doesn't do much. You can see that it starts to do things once I get to the extreme times, like 3 a.m., 5 a.m., and this is something I terribly hate about the Skydomes, and it may not be just the Skydomes that I have this issue with, but because I have the Skydome on, nothing is changing as far as the time. Again, we have the match sun to the Skydome turned on because we want the sun to be where the Skydome sun is. The only reason that the only way we could change that sun is if we turn that off. We would have full control of where the sun is here. Now, why is the light changing whenever I get to a different time? Well, specifically, it's not when I get to a different time. It's specifically when I get to, I guess you could say, some of the darkest times. Here early in the morning, late at night, whatever, where it's dark. My hunch is that the reason that these areas lighten up is that Twinmotion is perceiving that as being very dark. If you forget the Skydome, this time of day is affecting everything but the Skydome. But when we get to late at night, that becomes really dark. These areas become really dark and black, but we have auto exposure on, which means it's bringing those up to levels that we could see them because it's not black. We don't want it to be black. So that is happening with the Skydome being on as well, which is causing just mass confusion. So I've set the time for some reason, whatever, 2:51 a.m. So clearly it's dark, it's pitch black, but the Skydome is on and it's a sunset shot. Okay. Well, the dark that would normally happen without the Skydome is being translated through auto exposure. That's my best guess. So I would typically leave this more at a middle of the day neutral time because you can see anywhere really in the middle of the day does nothing. And I can't say that's the same with every Skydome, but I would just kind of leave the time alone if you're using the Skydome and matching the sun to it. Obviously, the background, you can do whatever you want, but that's really important. So also, we looked at the time. Well, let's look at the weather. Now, this is a similar type of thing here because you can imagine that the Skydome is just an image over the top of the sun that exists within Twinmotion. That doesn't mean that the weather and the sun is not actually behind that. And here's how I can begin to translate that to you. So by default, perfectly sunny, clear day. As I drag this over to the weather, obviously we get the rain, but we also see that some of my light is slightly different. I'm actually going to come into the effects here and turn particles off so we can see this. So as it becomes more cloudy, I get literally a change in the lighting. And I believe that's based on clouds that exist beyond the Skydome, based on the sun in Twinmotion behind the Skydome. I don't know why this exists if the Skydome is on. These are all weird things to me, so I'm only showing you this because it's things to be aware of. And finally, we'll go to seasons. Unfortunately, fortunately, it seems to only be affecting whether we have snow or not. That's kind of the main thing. I've turned particles off, so that's not a huge deal. Obviously, growth doesn't matter with the Skydome at all. So these are things to be aware of. I can't say it's perfect, but as long as you keep it a clear day, like clear, you're going to kind of get what you expect from the Skydome here. I mean, really you are. And that's what I like a lot about this. Obviously, the smog can impact things, of course, so turn that up or down as you wish. But just in general, just be aware of that because those are definitely some things that you want to know about because it's going to affect your shot. So, okay. We've looked at everything when it comes to Skydome. We have it in, of course, right here within media mode, but we have it in our regular scene as well. Looked at the intensity, matching the lighting, the sun, all of that to the Skydome. Of course, if you want others, just download them. I'm going to investigate now this location, the file path location, because if that's the case, maybe we can use our own. You know, obviously there's a ton here. Those are great resources, but maybe you take one yourself, make one yourself. Maybe it is literally of the site of your project. It's right there. I've done that before. It's really useful to be able to have a Skydome of your actual site. Besides that, maybe we can use a custom Skydome. And if that's the case, you will definitely see a video from me on that. And I hope I discover that being possible, but we'll see. So that will do it for Skydomes. We looked at all that we could with Skydomes, the settings, this and that, applying it in media mode to our images and whatnot, and all the different effects and kind of nuances of working with it compared to the regular sun and weather that we're used to seeing within Twinmotion. So again, that will do it for this video. If you happen to learn something, which I sure hope you did, please demolish that like button. It helps me out quite a lot. So that will do it again. I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for watching.